Chicago generally bans this apartment design in new residential buildings above 2 stories. Housing advocates say bringing it back could make smaller apartment buildings easier to build. Chicago fire officials say one stair would become a single point of failure and put residents and firefighters at risk. So how did one ordinary staircase end up in the middle of Chicago's housing debate? Well, hello, I'm AED Anant Deoras, a 14-year Chicago real estate professional with a love of urbanism and a focus on relocation and selling. And here is the basic difference in a single-stair building. A small number of apartments open around one central stair and usually an elevator. In the typical newer American apartment building, 2 stairs sit at opposite ends of a long hallway, with apartments lining both sides. That hallway layout is called a double-loaded corridor. The single-stair version is often called a point access block. Those names sound technical, but the visual difference is simple. One compact core versus 2 stairs connected by a long corridor. And that difference affects how many residents can get to their front doors. Chicago's rule comes from a reasonable fear. What happens when only stair fills with smoke or becomes blocked? Building codes move towards requiring 2 enclosed stairs, so residents would have another path out if one failed. Firefighters could also use one stair for searches, equipment, and hoses, while residents evacuate through the other. Chicago's current code generally requires more than one stairway in residential buildings above 2 stories, although an exterior rear stair can be qualified in some buildings up to 4 stories. That is one reason so many older Chicago apartment buildings have a front stair and those familiar rear porch systems. This is not some random rule that appeared for no reason. The second stair exists because during a fire, redundancy can matter. And now we get to why housing advocates care so much about this. 2 staircases usually need a hallway connecting them. That hallway takes up space, and on a narrow Chicago lot, space is everything. The apartments tend to become long and narrow, with most of their windows on one side. Larger 3- and 4-bedroom units are often easier to place only at the corners. A compact central core can give architects more flexibility. Apartments may get windows on 2 sides, better airflow, and layouts that work better for families. It also can make a smaller development more practical without assembling half a block. Now, I want to be very clear. This does not mean every single stair building would be affordable, attractive, or well-designed. It means one building rule can narrow the choices between the architect. Here is the strongest argument against the proposal. If a building has one stair and that stair becomes unusable, there is no backup. Chicago Buildings Commissioner Marlon Hopkins argued that fire, smoke, structural failure, or emergency operations could compromise the only path. Fire officials also said 2 stairs let residents move down one while firefighters move up the other with hoses and equipment. In one stair, those 2 flows collide, and that gets more serious for older residents, people with mobility limitations, and anyone who cannot quickly use stairs during emergency. Sprinkler smoke detectors and fire-rated doors can reduce risk, but opponents say none of those systems should carry the entire burden alone. And honestly, that is not an argument you can just brush aside, because you want more housing. The housing argument becomes easier to see in Lincoln Park, for example. Chicago once built 2 flats, 3 flats, walk-ups, and courtyard buildings on individual lots or small groups of lots. And many used compact stair arrangements that would be difficult to reproduce under current rules. The argument is that once similar small replacement buildings become harder to construct, renovation and larger redevelopment become more attractive. Renovation preserved a lot of Chicago's architecture, but it also sometimes meant combining smaller apartments into larger and more expensive homes. I want to be very careful here. One staircase rule did not make Lincoln Park expensive by itself. Land prices, zoning, demand, financing, and decades of neighborhood change all mattered. The stair rule was one pressure that narrowed the menu of buildings that could replace aging apartments without jumping straight into a much larger development. This debate also shows why Chicago housing cannot be judged only by neighborhood name or price per square foot. Building type, layout, stairs, elevators, assessments, and the way the property fits your daily routine all matter. If you're planning a move to Chicago, buying your next home, or selling before making that move, why don't you schedule a real estate consult with myself? We can look at your budget, your commute, the building types that fit your needs, and how much walkability or transit access you actually want. Use a link in the description, or there's a QR code right over here, and schedule a conversation. Chicago is not considering unlimited single-stair towers. Alderman Matt Martin's revised ordinance would apply only to new construction and cap these buildings at 5 stories. It would allow no more than 4 apartments per floor for a maximum of 20 units. The proposal also includes sprinklers, smoke detectors in common areas, self-closing doors, fire-rated separation, and a maximum 20-foot path from an apartment door to the stair. As of June 4th of 2026, reporting used for this video, the ordinance had received a city council subject matter hearing, but no vote has been taken. The fire department and Department of Buildings oppose the current version, and Martin said he planned to continue negotiating. So, this is still a proposal. It's not Chicago law. Chicago would not be inventing this idea. Seattle allowed some single-stair residential buildings up to 6 stories under specific limits. Austin adopted its own version after an 18-month process involving advocates, elected officials, and the fire department. That is useful context, but is not proof that Chicago should copy either city. Austin negotiated over travel distance, stair dimensions, smoke control, and other protections. Seattle's code and building conditions are not identical to Chicago's. The lesson is not that other city did it, so Chicago should do it too. The lesson is that these reforms depend on detailed rules, local firefighting practices, and whether the final design can still be built after every safety requirement is added. Legalizing a limited version of a single stair would suddenly make Chicago's apartments cheap. Land, labor, financing, zoning, parking rules, and permitting would still shape what gets built. But supporters argue it could make some narrow lots easier to use, especially along corridors where zoning already allows more housing. But a 2-stair building does not fit efficiently. It could create more options between a 3-flat and a large full block project. It could also make more family-size apartments easier to design. The trade-off is real. Chicago could gain more flexible layouts and smaller infill buildings. Residents would depend on one protected stair instead of 2 separate routes. That is why the safety requirements are not fine print. They are the entire debate. So why is this apartment staircase illegal in Chicago? Well, because the city's code generally assumes that once a residential building rises above 2 stories, residents and firefighters need another way out. That second stair provides redundancy, but it also changes the size, shape, and cost of the apartments Chicago can build. The real question is whether sprinklers, fire-rated construction, self-closing doors, short exit distances, and a strict 5-story limit can make one protected staircase safe enough. I see a real housing argument and a real safety concern, right? Now, would you live on a 5th floor with one protected stair, or would you still want a second exit? Let me know, comment below. And listen, if you want to understand why Chicago's older urban design still gives residents choices that most American cities do not, watch this video right here. Chicago's untold advantage over car-dependent America. It's on the screen right now.